Okay, everybody, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Today is the fifth of the sixth KBA series, What You Can Do With Your Law Degree, that we're doing for law students this fall. Today's focus is on wills, trusts, and estate planning. We've got should be a few attorneys here to speak to everybody, but about their experiences. But we'll see if Bailey struggles in. So for everybody that doesn't know me, my name is Jonathan Guest. I am the membership coordinator and database admin here at the KBA, as well as the law student staff liaison. So you probably get plenty of emails from me. Today we have some attorneys who are here to speak to you about wills and trust and estate planning and all that good stuff. First, we have Sherry DaCosta Alley of Pinnacle Financial Partners. Sherry got her law degree from UT College of Law and was licensed in 2003. We also have Will Brewer of McGehee, Cole, Gwindy, and Walling. Will got his law degree also from UT College of Law and was also licensed in 2014. Did you guys? Oh wait, no, sorry. So we also have, she's not here yet, but we have Bailey Shiremeyer of Elder Law of East Tennessee. She's not here yet, but she got her law degree from Regent University and was licensed in 2014. So everybody, thank you so much for being here. Deanna, you're the only student here right now. If you have any questions about anything in particular, anything that you want them to specifically address, either feel free to use the chat box and I'll be sure to work that in. So I guess the first thing I want you all to do is, and Sherry, we can start with you. So you kind of just did this before we got on the call here, but give us kind of a general rundown of where you were at when you finished law school, kind of where you started your career, and then kind of the path that led you to where you're at now.
Okay, great. So I was clerking for London and Amburn at while I was in law school, my last 2 years. And so I joined them after I graduated, which is interesting because they're known as a healthcare or a health law firm.
Mm-hmm.
They do a lot of med malpractice defense and then some personal injury trucking companies and a couple other, but basically they're hired by, they do insurance defense and some transactional work. And so the thinking was to start an estate planning practice with me, and I was too naive and inexperienced to realize that that was a bad idea straight out of law school. So I was there, I practiced there for, I want to say about 1.5 years or so after graduation. The estate planning business was not rolling in over there. So I was getting pulled more into litigation, which I knew I didn't want to do. So from there, I moved firms and worked at Gentry Tipton for about 1 year. The practice was more what I wanted to be doing, but I did not necessarily fit into the culture over there. So after that, I moved to Kaiser and Black down in Maryville, where I was for the last 6 years that I was in private practice. Loved it there. Had a great mentor in Marty Black, which was really important because I had not had mentoring previously, this is not an area that you can just jump in straight out of law school and know what you're doing, because every probate in every court is different, in every county is different. So then I had the opportunity to go work for East Tennessee Foundation, which is a community foundation. So they're a public charity. And my role was advancement, which is basically donor relations, and general counsel. So that was really exciting. It was really fun to be part of a team because in law firms, sometimes you're in silos. So this was a lot more teamwork. And then 3 years ago, I was not looking to change, but I got an opportunity I could not pass up to come join the trust department at Pinnacle Bank. And so I've been here about 3 years, a couple months, and I love it because we do fun things like this. We have a spirit week going on right now to celebrate our anniversary since we can't gather in person. So that's why this crazy carnival-like decoration is behind me here, and the Hershey Kisses on my desk.
That's a good excuse. I'm just kidding. That's great. So, Will, what about you?
Yeah, so I did not expect to get into estate planning out of law school. I spent 5 years between undergrad and law school, interning, making coffee, making copies, and then onward and upward at the Knox County DA's office. And that's what I wanted to do was do criminal law. And it didn't work out. And so when I graduated law school, I thought, well, I need to do something else. And so I decided to start my own practice, hang my own shingle. And I knew that the one thing that people had talked to me about during law school, people at church, people in my family, friends of the family, whatever, everybody asked me if I knew how to do a will. It was either that or divorce, and I didn't want to do divorce. So I knew that that was going to probably be my most opportune path towards money straight out of law school. So I decided to focus on that, and by happenstance, having worked at the DA's office, I'd gotten to know the late Dan McGehee, who does criminal defense and estate planning, and so he kind of took me in. Said, you can have an office in my building, you can do your own work, hang your own shingle, but I will mentor you in criminal defense and estate planning. And I'm going to echo Sherry's sentiments. This is not an area I thought was naive to think, well, you get a template of a will and you're home free. None of the people that I know are billionaires, so it can't be that complex. But mentorship is crucial in this area, and so Dan and a couple of other lawyers in his practice were instrumental in helping me kind of hone my estate planning skills. And it's been a fantastic part of my practice. It's very steady. Um, Rarely is it dramatic. And honestly, not to be too crass, but in the middle of a pandemic, people realize their mortality and need estate planning done. So it's been pretty lucrative the last year and a half. So I haven't regretted it for a minute.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I'm curious. That is a good point. Yeah, I guess like Sherry, have you seen the same thing with the kind of an uptick in the amounts of I guess cases you're getting or clients you're getting for the since the pandemic began?
Well, unfortunately, I've had several clients pass, none of them from COVID, though. A lot of my clients were elderly to begin with, and they had Pinnacle named as their executor in most of those cases. So, as in my role as trust officer, when Pinnacle Bank is named as the executor in someone's will or as trustee of a trust, I am one of the people at Pinnacle who will go and do all the stuff that an executor does, everything from working with the family to clean out the house. Usually I'm not out there having to move furniture and stuff, thank goodness, but we'll coordinate that with the family. I've handled the sale of a house, all that stuff. So yeah, unfortunately, I've had a lot of clients pass, but I've also had a lot of clients who are more, as you said, Will, conscious of, the fact that if you don't plan ahead of time, this, something, the end could sneak up on you. And so the good part is that a lot of my clients that I've been trying to talk to about making sure their estate plan is up to date, and we don't draft estate plans at all, but I will sit and review it with them, and sometimes talk with their lawyer to express what they're wanting in more legalese terms, or just coordinate and make sure it's a document that we would be willing to serve as executor under. So
I guess that's
they're
good.
finally listening to that.
Yeah, I guess if I'm a law student listening to this, what I'm hearing is that maybe a little bit more awareness will lead to more business in this field in the near future. So that's potentially.
And I'll also say that this is very much an industry where people wake up on a Monday and think, oh my gosh, I need a will. And then they call you and they're hot to trot and you say, okay, write out your wishes and your desires, and then you don't hear from them for 6 months because they've forgotten about it and life has caught up with them.
Yeah.
And so it's an industry that you really have to kind of keep on top of your clients to stay
Mhm.
vigilant, because it's not a crime that they've committed, or money that they are losing in a lawsuit. It's something that they stumbled upon one day. But that's been another great thing about the pandemic is last March, everybody went home, and maybe they were working from home, or maybe they weren't working at all, but it gave a lot of people a lot of time to do some spring cleaning, in their house and in their finances and their business. And so it woke a lot of people up, not only thinking about mortality, but also just thinking about, well, I've got 6 months or a year on my hands of pandemic life. How can I gather you rosebuds? And so it was helpful. And I think estate planning is cyclical. Some
Mhm.
seasons people are all about it, whether it's a good economic season, or a pandemic season, or it's not a good economic season, and people don't have the money to do it. So uh, it's an interesting area of the law to be involved with.
Yeah. Okay, so Sherry, you seem like you seemed from the onset, seemed like you knew that this was, wills and estate planning, stuff like that was something that you wanted to pursue. Maybe Will got into it a little bit later, but so Sherry, we'll start with you. So why is this area important to you, and how did that play into choosing it as an area to focus on?
It's actually a funny story because my first day of law school as a 1L at UT, I said, I want to do anything except family law and tax law, because I survived my parents' divorce and that was enough. And tax law would be boring. Um, Famous last words. My undergrad degree is in finance, and the natural intersection of finance and law is taxes. And as a 2L, I took my first tax class with Amy Hess and loved it and was just excited. And I remember looking around the room going, doesn't anybody else think this is cool? I'm kind of a geek like that. So after that, I decided to take every tax class that UT had. I'm probably the oldest person on this call, so this was back before the Wills Clinic, but there were a couple of business tax classes, and an estate planning capstone class that incorporated some tax planning. So I just decided early on after my first tax class that I really did like it and it made sense to me.
That's a good story. What about you, Will?
Yeah, like I said, I knew a lot of people that had asked me, if I could do a will. And I remember, I took Professor Hess's estate planning class my last semester of law school, thinking, one semester and you're done and you know it all, and it will all come magically to you. And I remember when I finally figured out that I was going to start out doing estate planning, I went back to Professor Hess and said, okay, this is where I am. I need a little help starting out. What are some resources that I need? She said, this really isn't something that you should be doing by yourself for at least 5 years. So you
I
need to
wish she had
go.
told me that.
Yeah. So you need to go get hired on somewhere and be somebody's associate for 5 years. And she was exactly right. But at the time it steamed me because it's like, I just spent all this money and stress and time for law school, and what good has it done me? But she was right. And I think that there's, obviously a middle area of mentorship, where you can be doing it on your own, but have the necessary help. Um, and it's I do several areas. I do collections and criminal defense, and this I enjoy estate planning the most because I feel like I'm helping people the most. And a lot of times it's people that I know, or people in my community, and so who are grateful for it. Like I said, they're typically not in a stressful time of their lives. Sometimes it's probate and they have lost a loved one, but they're grateful for the help rather than, beating down my door and my email inbox with questions and problems. So, I've have a few church bulletin ads out there, and it's pretty simple fishing for clients when you know the right demographics to hit.
Yeah. Okay, so Will, we'll stick with you. So what, if you can answer this, what kinds of questions should students be asking now, or experiences should they be seeking out to better help determine whether or not pursuing this area of law would be something good for them?
Yeah, I think obviously take the class, take a few classes, take tax. I never took tax law. I wish that I had. So much of estate planning intersects with tax. But I think look at opportunities. You know, Sherry started out with a firm. I started out basically hanging my own shingle with a little help. But what is the avenue that you're going to take to go into this field, knowing that you can't start day one doing it yourself? Are you going to go work for a firm and have them hand you cases and mentor you in that way, or are you going to strike out on your own but need a mentor in some form or fashion while striking out on your own? And Sherry brought up a good point that wills. It's good to know to advise people on whether they want a will or a trust, and how do they want to construct that document. But you if you're in this practice area long enough, your clients will pass away, and so your will practice becomes a probate practice. And that has been one of the more frustrating parts of my practice, is knowing that Granger County and Union County do probate law completely different from Knox County. And the forms that Knox County is more than happy to give you and have you fill in the blanks, you have to construct your own for Granger County or Union County. And so, to know kind of the depth of it, it's not just having a will template and being good. It's knowing the full gamut of what this area of practice entails. That, okay, it's fine to focus on wills, but if eventually those wills end up in probate, and how are you going to handle that area?
Yeah, Sherry, what about you?
So I would say, certainly, you're going to need to be mentored on some level. I would take at least one intro tax class. Even your smaller estates and trusts have to deal with income taxes. So just knowing the basic terminology of taxes is helpful, even if you're not handling, or working with clients that have $20 million estates.
Yeah.
I would also suggest reading, and I don't have any titles of books that come to mind, but I would, do a little bit of reading. If you think this is really an area you want to work in, a little bit of reading about grief, or people as they age, because in this area in particular, and probably in family law too, we are part psychotherapist at times. I have a lot of clients. When I was in private practice at Kaiser and Black, I would be drafting wills, and one of the first questions we would ask is, who are all your children? And they're like, well, these three are the ones that I'm leaving stuff to. And I'm like, okay, are there any other children? Because we've got to acknowledge them in the will so that it's, clear that you were in your right mind and knew who your family was. You just don't want to leave anything to that one. And some people, that's very emotional for them. And the one thing, that I would always tell them to reassure them is every family has something that, they don't necessarily want to shine a light on, but it's important to at least, be honest with your lawyer about who the people are. We don't have to know the whole history. But if there is a family member that you do want to leave things to and they have issues, we need to know that too. Because maybe we'll advise you to put it in a trust so that, they can't spend it all at one time or something like that. So working with people, particularly about things that are family secrets or unpleasant, is kind of goes along with this area if you're going to do planning. So if you, to the extent you can read a couple books or something that give you kind of more of that social work or empathy kind of knowledge, it's helpful. I mean, you certainly don't need a social work degree, but it's not just the tax law and the technical stuff. You have to be able to relate to people and do so over sensitive topics.
Yeah, we had the last week we had the family law discussion as well as the juvenile court discussion, and I heard that spoken about at length as especially with family law as being a skill set that you need. You practicing law and is complicated enough, and then you also have to. I heard an attorney say that they essentially just let people vent to them because people need to get stuff off their chest. But you have, if you can speak to this, I know you spoke a little bit too, but this is a topic that I've heard brought up over and over, so I like to speak a little bit more about it. So I don't know if it comes naturally to you for a person like me, I don't practice law, but it doesn't come naturally to me to just be a sounding board for someone to kind of vent to. So for students out there that are maybe worried about this aspect of practicing, do you have any tips or strategies or anything that you deal with to help you decompress afterwards or anything like that, as far as dealing with the maybe the non-law aspects of your practice? We'll stick with you first.
Yeah, and I haven't always done a good job with remembering that stress management is an important part of practicing law, like to manage my own stress level, because we do deal with clients who, even in the planning stage, and if we're talking about, family secrets or things they don't want, it's stressful, probably more so for the clients than for me. But certainly on the administration side, I mean, I have had siblings get into arguments with each other, and you're uncomfortable because you're kind of in the middle. And as a corporate trustee, that's why we're there most of the time, is so that to kind of maintain the power balance between siblings and things like that. So it is important to do yoga or go work out or whatever you do that helps you relieve stress, because if you ignore it and think that's my client's problem, not mine, and stress really does affect you physically, and you'll be years out of practice or out of law school and start probably feeling some of the effects of that stress if you don't learn how to deal with it and have an outlet for it. I would also say that, we've all had situations. Just draw on your own experience. Maybe your experience isn't exactly the same as your clients, whatever problem they're telling you about, or whatever the beneficiaries are worried about. But we've all had times where we've felt uncomfortable or, sad because we've lost someone, or a pet, where we've lost a pet or something. So just kind of be sensitive to, that's, people like to talk a lot when they're grieving. And maybe it's completely irrelevant to what you do, and you're, but having an ear, them feeling like they're heard, I think goes a long way.
Yeah. What about you, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Sherry's spot on. I think it's so important to have an empathetic ear, and I think it's very important and tricky a lot of times to parse through that personal situation. So many times I have one child that brings their parent to my office to do a will, and you're not supposed to let that child really be in the meeting. So the child sits in the lobby, and you have to figure out from mom that, well, there's 5 other children, and this one's my favorite, but the 5 other children are out of state, and you kind of have to parse through, okay, what is the dynamic here? Are the other 5 children going to be bitter and angry that this one is kind of spearheading, or is there a common understanding that this one is in charge of mom's affairs, and he has full authority? So and you're dealing a lot of times with elderly people, and maybe it's not dementia or mental incompetency, but it is kind of a fogginess of, you know, they're uncomfortable, they're nervous, they don't like to think about. I can't tell you how many people call me. We want to write our will. We're ready to do this, and they come in and sit with me, people of all ages, and they just can't get it out because they do not want to talk about death. And so I think you have to be empathetic enough to kind of parse through that dynamic, and like Sherry said, get people to kind of open up and explain to you what the situation is, but also to have the confidence to know that this is not your problem. I mean, it is your problem, as and that you are an advocate for these people, and they are trusting you to do good work for them, but this is not your family. This is not your sibling rivalry. This is not your mother dying of cancer, you know, whatever the case may be. And so whether it's working out or going to sit alone in a movie theater, you know, whatever your typical stress reliever is to get out of your own head, that becomes even more important. I mean, I had done a will for a gentleman that I knew was slowly dying of cancer, and he was fairly young to be doing so. And his family called me one day and said, you know, he's passed away. Hospice is here. The mortuary is sending over the hearse, and we don't know if this is the right mortuary. So we know he had talked to you. We know, you know, he had conversations with you that he didn't have with us. So and I had to go to my office, look in the file, and realize that the hearse that was on its way was the wrong mortuary. You know, we had in fact talked about what mortuary he wanted, and that wasn't it. So in that instance, you are such a great help and solace to your clients, and they are relying on you for that. But it's not your person, it's not your family.
Mhm.
So balancing that thin line of empathy and kind of exclusion at the same time.
And I would just add, if you don't take time to unplug like that, it's hard to kind of remember that it's not your problem. You kind of get sucked in there and
Yeah.
can feel all those emotions at the same time. So
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Seems like it would happen to me too. So, okay, so the students were allowed to submit questions through the registration process. So I want to kind of hit on some of these. So, we'll start with you this time. So, what does your and I like the experience that you both have for this question. So, what does your day-to-day work life look like, and how does how does this area of law compare and contrast to other areas that you've worked in?
Yeah. So I spend a lot of my mornings in court. So like I said, I do a lot of collections and evictions and criminal defense. So most of my mornings are spent in court, which means that most of my afternoons are spent in client meetings. Estate planning typically takes up most of my client meeting time. The other areas of my practice aren't really meeting intensive; they're more court intensive. Um, so it's important for me to be able to schedule those meetings and balance kind of the court office structure, but also the hardest thing that I have to deal with is I have such a hard time carving out time to draft documents. I like meeting with people and I like being in court. I'm not very much of a let's sit down and focus on this document drafting. It's not what I wanted to do out of law school. And the part of estate planning that appeals to me is the personal interaction, not the document drafting. So it's really important for me a lot of times to make sure that I carve out that time to actually draft the documents, and not get too far behind, so that I have because the farther you get from a consultation, and the more you forget about intricacies of that conversation that you had with these people that need to be integrated in the will that I didn't write down in my notes. And so, and you know, like I said, people tend to forget about this. So if I am also forgetting about it or putting it off, then it's not going to get done because nobody's staying on top of it.
Sure. Sure. What
Will,
about you?
you just reminded me of two pearls of wisdom that Marty Black had given me when I started working with her. The first one was, don't schedule your clients for nights and weekends, because if you do it once, they'll expect it every single time. And she's like, doctor's offices generally aren't open. We're not doing brain surgery. Chances are it can wait till tomorrow morning. So I thought that was a great pearl of wisdom from her. The second was that she would always make appointments for an hour and a half so that she could spend 45 minutes to an hour meeting with the client and then go to her office and dictate the documents to her forms and tell her in the dictation, tell her assistant, what to fill in here and to take this paragraph out. So she would at least have a rough draft right after the appointment, because you're right, the farther you get away from that initial consultation, the easier it becomes to, or if you're like me, you have some half of something in your notes and then you're like, what was the rest of that? As far as my day-to-day routine here at Pinnacle, it's pretty interesting, and we always have to build in time for the unknown, because you never know when a beneficiary is going to call and want you to make a distribution, and then you've got to go get the approvals that you need. And sometimes those are more urgent, or, tomorrow or 3 days is fine. It just depends kind of on the beneficiary and what their situation is. In an estate, you have set things that you need to do. I mean, you always have to, once you get the letters testamentary, you always have to deal with any other bank accounts that are out there, and then, any other assets, and gathering all the assets, and then the 10-care release and all of those steps. But there's a lot of times in the probate process where you're waiting for something back from someone else, like from 10-care or from the CPA for the tax return or something. So you never know when that's going to come back to you and it's going to be your turn to do something again. So you can't, my biggest lesson in the last few years since I started actually doing the administration side was, you can't schedule, 4 or 5 meetings in a day. You've got to maybe schedule 2, maybe 3, so that you have time to check your emails and phone calls and respond, because sometimes you have to do things somewhat immediately. The other thing that kind of surprised me, coming from private practice and then a charity to banking, was there's a lot of reports and compliance and trainings that we need to do, which aren't the most exciting things in the world. They don't really require your legal brain too terribly much, but you have to do them, and you have to do them on time. Otherwise, it's a big problem for the bank. There's usually a couple days at the end of the month where I have to sit and do account reviews, which are just answering questions on the computer about that particular account. Then we also do client reviews, at least annually, but sometimes depending on the client, maybe twice a year, or where we sit down and we go over their investments with them and show them the performance. I mean, they get statements all the time, but it's just a good time to have face-to-face time and make sure that any questions they have are getting answered. And that's usually at those meetings when I try to review their estate plan or their lack of progress toward making an estate plan, and say, well, here's how can we help you? Do you need some names of attorneys? What, we generally know their assets, so we can help kind of guide them that way, and where we think it might be a good fit personality wise, where we'll give them a few names of attorneys and suggest that they contact someone. But Will's absolutely right. You have to follow up with them, because they don't want to talk about their own death. So they don't want to think about it. They don't want to get it done. So, I have some clients where after 2 years of me saying that, 2-3 times a year, they finally do it. So.
Can I chime in and ask my own question? So
Yeah.
Sherry, how do you balance? I try not to be the executor for my clients, because I don't want to deal with the nitty gritty that, let's go sell all the furniture and let's go. So how do you balance? You said you typically pass that stuff on to the family to do. How do you balance kind of being the attorney rather than the yard sale tactician?
You find vendors that you can work with, and it's going to be different. I'm always looking to meet, real estate agents and auctioneers, because different situations just call for different people to work with. But so usually if the will has a provision saying that the children can, or grandchildren or whomever it may be, can divide up tangible personal property, we'll make sure they have access to the residence to do that. Of course, anything that is specifically bequeathed to someone, we're going to make sure that they get that, and that, we have the obligation to make sure that is kept safe until it's delivered. If it's a situation where there's no real children or close family members and they just want everything liquidated, then a lot of times we'll call in an auction house, or there's a couple businesses that will essentially clean out the house. One recently that I had, the family member was going to get all the tangible personal property, and they were happy to handle getting that out of the house. So we made sure they had a key to the house, and they had a few months to methodically go through everything and take stuff out of there. And then we got the key back, and I had a realtor help me, determine what price point to put it at and what needed to be done before we could sell it. We had some very vivid paint colors in there. So one of the things we had to do is hire a painting contractor to get, more neutral colors, because that affects buyers a lot. So it's just a matter of just kind of stepping through it, but realizing, that we had a handyman company come and fix a couple things. There were, just minor things that were just, I can't even remember what they were now, but stuff that I don't know how to do, that we had to switch some light fixtures because we had some very dated light fixtures in there too, and they weren't expensive. So, I got them at Lowe's or Home Depot or somewhere, but I needed somebody to put them in because I don't know how to do that. So
Amazing, the
just little
skill
things
set.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the experience that you probably got just that you can apply to your personal life. That's probably kind of helpful at this point.
Yep, I've got numbers of more handyman companies.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so another student question. This is a little more straightforward. So Sherry, we'll stick with you. So they want to know, how do you meet billable hours / what is your pay based on?
That's a great question for me. So we don't have billable hours. And a matter of fact, that got mentioned one time in terms of handling estates. And I jokingly told my colleagues on the call that they were giving me and a couple other lawyer trust officers PTSD by mentioning that. So every corporate trustee probably handles it a bit differently. Pinnacle, one of the things I love about Pinnacle Bank, and I don't know that I could necessarily be a corporate trustee other places, because Pinnacle is very team focused. I've heard from friends who have worked for other corporate trustees that it's very much kind of a sales culture, and you have to bring people in and bring new accounts in. And so when you're doing that, you don't want the neighbor in the next office to know who you've been talking to, because you don't want them to take your account. Pinnacle's not like that. We're very much, if our Knoxville team meets its fee goal for the year, and in other words, a dollar amount of fees for all of the accounts that Knoxville Trust manages, then that's great. If we don't, it's not like we're all getting fired. We just, our manager might have a conversation with us about, was the goal not realistic? What happened? Did accounts that we thought were going to stay unexpectedly leave? We just have a conversation about it. But Pinnacle is very much, we all win together, we all lose together. So for example, there's 4 trust officers here in Knoxville. 2 of us are lawyers. But the other 3 all hate handling estates. So if an estate comes in, even for one of their clients, like one of their clients passes away, they typically will come bring me the file and say, hey, I got an estate for you. And they'll hand it off to me. And if it's going to continue in a trust for the beneficiaries, then when the estate process is over and the trust is set up, I'll hand it back to them and say, okay, you're the trust officer again. So it's really great because we get to share our expertise and don't feel like I have to be an expert in everything just so I can get the accounts to come in.
Yeah, that's great. Well, what about you?
Will you just, I was listening to Sherry. Will you repeat the original question?
Yeah, it was just kind of simply just how do you meet billable hours
Yeah.
/ what is your pay based on?
I can't stand billable hours, so I try to avoid them at all costs. And I think that's an important facet is when you're parsing out sibling rivalries and terminal diagnoses, it's important to parse out what you think and what you expect the complexity of this case to be, and a lot of times that won't end up being true. So I base mine on retainers. So typically, I've done enough estate planning documents, wills, trusts, whatever. That's pretty simple for me to figure out what the retainer is going to be, and to stay within that. Probate is a little more complicated, so I will quote a retainer that's my standard, easy, uncontested probate retainer, and put it in my engagement letter and explain to my clients that if things get hairy or contested or whatever, that number will go up. But I try and stick within that retainer and keep it very simple for my folks. And but to me, billable, you're dealing with so many issues trying to keep up with billable hours on these things. And like Sherry's, that's an executor job, but I mean, you're going to charge somebody to go to Home Depot to purchase a light fixture that you're trying to get on sale, but now you're trying to tack on billable hours on top of the price of a light fixture. That it doesn't really pan out. So to me, a flat fee or retainer type structure is more apropos.
And I probably neglected to say, so Pinnacle Bank or any corporate executor generally is going to have a fee schedule, usually based on the size of the estate. So it's a
Yeah.
percentage of the estate, and sometimes bigger estates can be simpler. It just depends really more on the type of property that's owned. So one of the first things I do is sit down with the beneficiaries, and we look at our normal fee schedule, but there's been a lot of times where I don't charge the full fee according to our fee schedule because they didn't own real estate, and it's all a lot simpler to move securities in an account. So it doesn't justify charging, that whole amount.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you both have talked already just on your own about your mentorships and how important some of your mentors were, especially learning this trade. So students are always encouraged to seek out mentoring relationships. What kinds of things were you looking for in your current mentors, and what steps did you take either while in law school or early in your career to foster and build those relationships? We'll start with you.
I think I was lucky to stumble upon a couple of lawyers that were willing to help me, that were later in their career, and early in their careers they had been mentored, and so they knew the importance of that role, and were at a point in their career where they could spend the time to pass that on. I think the KBA is so instrumental in fostering that. When you're not in court and you're not seeing other lawyers, it's hard to know who's in this field and who can I talk to about this. And so, joining committees with the KBA and kind of pinpointing other people that are in that practice area, the mentor for the moment list is, I've used that several times, and that can foster really good relationships, and being bold and opening up a phone directory and saying, oh, well, Sherry does estate planning. I'm going to, ask her to go out for a cup of coffee and pick her brain for an hour. And I think when you're starting out, being bold and aggressive about finding mentors and fostering those relationships is important.
Sherry, what about you?
I would say if you know you want to practice or have a substantial part of your practice in this area, then definitely, get involved with the KBA, get involved with the TBA. Even lawyers who don't practice in this area will sometimes refer to you, but they're not going to do that if they don't know you. So the more involved you can be in the legal community in general, it's helpful, even though I very often feel like all these people know all the judges because they're in court all the time and I never am. But that's okay. You get over that. I would also say that in Knoxville, we've had several what we call estate planning study groups. It's a group of usually lawyers and CPAs and trust officers and investment people and occasionally charitable giving officers, just kind of form organically. Usually it's people who are relatively new in their career when it forms. And I think we were the fourth one, the group that I'm in. And it formed almost 20 years ago when I was a baby lawyer. And it has been truly instrumental in just having other people that well enough to bounce ideas off of sometimes. We're all pretty much peers, so there's not, we all started our careers probably within 3 to 5 years of each other, but sometimes it's easier to ask a question of people that you view as peers as opposed to somebody much older, and they'll just throw out ideas and you can then take it or leave it. Also, the Knoxville Estate Planning Council is really helpful. We've been meeting on Zoom now, but typically there are, I think, 4 meetings a year, 4 or 5. And they're always on estate planning topics, and there's experts. And the beauty of Zoom is we've had some experts from across the country be able to speak to us. But I will say too, the networking at those meetings is great because you're in a room with people from different professions. I mean, there's investment professionals, there's CPAs, there's just across the board, anybody that deals with estate planning at all. But there's often a lot more experienced people in that room than you, and you can get to know those folks, so that, again, having a relationship and them having a face to go with your name makes it easier for you to ask a question if you ever really do get stumped.
Yeah, that's great advice. And Will, I appreciate the plug for the mentor for the moment. That's been useful.
You can send my check in the mail.
Yeah, for any law students watching this, if you ever want to pick a brain of an attorney in a particular area of law, the mentor for the moment is available to any KPA member. So you can log on there, search an area of law. It'll give you a whole list of the attorneys who have signed up. They've already signed up to be the quote mentor, so you don't have to worry about picking their brains about anything. They're already ready to go and answer questions. So I would encourage anybody to use that tool. So I appreciate that plug, Will. I want to talk about, we've got about 10 minutes left. So Anna, if you have any questions in particular that you would like these two to address, please you go ahead and use the chat box right now, and I'll be sure to get that in. So I kind of want to speak, you spoke a bit about this, one of you did, I can't remember which, but so practicing in Knoxville. And I don't know if you've practiced in other cities, but from just kind of the experience that you have, can you compare and contrast practicing law in Knoxville to other cities, larger cities like Nashville, Memphis, Atlanta, Cincinnati, the kind of the bigger areas around here. So
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, geez, sorry, that was Siri. Siri, we'll start with you. Can you expand on that a bit?
Well, my whole career since I've been licensed has been in the Knoxville area. Kaiser and Black is down in Maryville, so technically that's Blount County in a different city. But I did clerk one summer for a firm in Chattanooga. And I was doing a lot of estate planning sort of work there because they knew and I knew that was a field I wanted to pursue. So I will say I've never worked in Nashville, but I have attorney friends that graduated with me who are in Nashville, and The one thing I keep hearing, and I think it still holds true, is that Knoxville's bar is very collegial and friendly. Now, I haven't been in court in several years because I tend to deal with uncontested probates and all, but I have found that to be true. Our bar is very friendly. You know, we tend to do a lot of events together, but even when I was practicing at Kaiser and Black, and I had to team up with some of my litigator colleagues. They would say that, you know, you don't just notice people into hearings. You pick up the phone and call them and see if they're available for a hearing on this date. You know, your opposing counsel, that's the way you treat them, the way you would want to be treated. That is not the case in Chattanooga, and they're kind of legendary for being a little more adversarial. And I would imagine the same is probably true in Nashville and any of the bigger cities.
Yeah. Will, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I don't practice outside of this area really, but I will say kind of on the flip end, you know, Knoxville is the big city to a lot of our surrounding communities.
Mhm.
And so, and I'll take, I talked about this earlier, but one of the biggest,
So,
You muted.
sorry, Will, it's my fault. It's my fault. I muted you.
so like if you have a probate estate in Knox County, you know, they have forms that they have created, and they're essentially fill in the blank forms. And, you know, if you call them and say, hey, you know, what other forms do I need to submit to close out this estate? They will mail you the forms that you still need to submit. And it's very easy. It's very collegial. And I think that is a testament to a big, I mean, not as big of a city as Knoxville is, a big city law community that they are doing this so much that they have an entire staff dedicated to just probate cases in the Chancery Court. And you go to a lot of these smaller counties, and they don't have a probate staff. It's the Chancery Court. And so they're dealing with everything that Chancery Court deals with, and probate is a fraction of that. So they are relying on you to create your own documents and basically to know what you need already. And you know, sometimes there is a bitterness that, you know, somebody from Knoxville is encroaching on their local bar, and maybe not from the courthouse, but maybe the other attorneys that you're dealing with are bitter that you're taking their business. But it you know, there definitely is a dynamic there. And yesterday morning, I had a Zoom hearing in Campbell County, and you have to submit a request to have a Zoom hearing. So I submitted my request 3 weeks ago, and I never heard back. So yesterday morning, I called and 8:30 a.m. when the court opened, I said, hey, you know, I'm supposed to have a Zoom hearing today. Nobody ever sent me a link to it. And they said, well, A, we lost your application. We're just now seeing it. And B, you're lucky it's not raining yet. It's about to rain. And if it rains, our Zoom internet goes out. So if it rains, no promises on your internet connection. And that's no slam against the good folks in Campbell County, because I love practicing there, but it is a testament to the different communities that you practice in. And I'm sure to Nashville and Memphis, you know, Knoxville is the Campbell County of the state of Tennessee. So anyway, it's important to know where you are practicing and who has the home field advantage where you are practicing, because sometimes it's not you.
And I will say, when I was at Kaiser and Black, they're in Maryville, so most of my estates and things were in Maryville, but we did a lot of work in Loudoun County too. And you need to be humble. If you're from Knoxville or even from Maryville and go into Loudoun County, don't go in there and say, well, Knoxville, we've done it this way, because you're going to make instant enemies if you do that. Nobody likes to be told what to do, and they don't like the suits from Knoxville coming in and telling them how would they do it there.
These big
Amen.
city folks, these big city Knoxville folks. Huh? Yeah. Okay, we've got time for a couple more. So Deanna did have a question, so we'll stick with you, Sherry. So what do you, I don't even know if you guys hire interns, but what would you look for in hiring a student intern / law student?
Pinnacle does not. We actually have a hiring model where we typically hire people with 10 years or more experience. But I would say just on the whole, for any employer, personality and being a good fit into the culture of the organization that you're going into is probably key, because we can teach you a whole bunch of other skills, but we can't teach good fit. That's not to say that we want everyone to be the same. Pinnacle, in particular, is very committed to diversity, and there's a big push to try to make sure that our leadership and our markets reflect the populations in our various markets. So we're not looking for cookie cutter. That's not what I mean by fit, but you have to, be a team player. You have to be willing to trust people and have them be able to count on you and things like that. But that's all I can say, because we don't really hire interns.
Yeah. Will, what about you?
Yeah, I don't hire interns either, but a few of the attorneys that I mentioned earlier that kind of share an office with me have in the past, and I've dealt with them. And I know the more successful ones, there is a difference between, I don't know, I'm interested in estate planning. I don't know all that there is to know about it. Will you teach me? Okay, sure, great. Um, it's not being unknowledgeable about something. It's I'm going to learn this, but I'm also open-minded and have enough forethought to anticipate problems with this case. Even though I don't know the law, I know what problems are going to arise, or I know how to issue spot, and somebody that I can trust to, um, especially in estate planning. Here is a template. Here are the facts of this estate. I want you to do your best of drafting this document. And of course, I'm going to check it at the end, but somebody who is at least independent and competent enough to kind of put the puzzle pieces together. And then that kind of would help me in teaching them the finer points of it all. But if you don't know anything, and you're not forward thinking enough to make up for that in other ways, then there's not a lot of good to be done, and there's not a lot of mutual benefit to be had.
Sure.
I would also say too, based on my experiences clerking while I was in law school, that even if you don't think you want to work for a big firm, I mean, I'm not saying waste their time and waste your time, but if you can get a clerkship with a big firm to see what it's like, you can get usually a lot of varied experience. And also, you could be surprised. I mean, just like I wasn't going to practice tax law or anything, you may change your mind. So it's a good opportunity if you can, clerk for a firm that does that kind of practice area.
Sure. All right. So final question here. So I like to ask this, you may not have anything, so no pressure either way, but I like to ask this as kind of the last question, because for every session, because it seems to bring out some interesting answers. So just in general, Sherry, we'll start with you. What do you see as the quote next big development in estate planning and trusts and whatnot?
Wow. I mean, what comes to mind today is tax reform. If, as I said to one of my colleagues the other day, if Congress ever gets back to actually governing instead of just opposing whatever the other party wants to do, there might be some large scale reforms different than what's been proposed. I would say that. I would say probably a lot more trusts and a lot more family litigation, because I have seen, even in my career, which at what is this, 18 years now, where I've seen that beneficiaries are a lot more argumentative with each other and with their fiduciaries.
You will.
I'll say one that has been going on, and I think will continue to get bigger, is online vendors that offer estate planning documents, Rocket, Zoom, or whatever. That people don't want to pay for things if they don't have to, and so I think having to combat that and and finding some way to ensure that the documents that people are creating for themselves on those websites are competent and can be upheld in a court of law is something that the legal industry is going to have to keep tackling and stay on top of, because I think it's only going to get bigger. And secondly, I think the pandemic afforded us a lot of opportunities to modernize this industry, to have remote notarization and remote witnessing of wills, via Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. So much of this is old and outdated, and there are important rules in place to be able to authenticate these documents, and to verify that the testator is who he says he is, and we're witnessing that he's signing his document, and that's very important. But software has caught up to us, and like so much of the world, the pandemic has helped us know what can be done, and how we can adapt with no loss at all. And so I really hope that we take a beat and figure out how to continue those trends. And I know a lot of older attorneys and judges on CLEs that I've watched are not keen on that idea, but I think it is the way of the future, and I think we need to embrace it. And I think that the more the legal community can meet people where they're at and make it convenient for people to engage our services, the better off the industry will be. And I think having remote notarization or remote witnessing of documents, when people are scared to be around each other, or to come in, especially elderly folks, is vitally important.
Yeah. Well, that is it, everybody. I appreciate you both, and appreciate you, Deanna, for stopping by and listening in, and Will and Sherry. I know you guys are both very busy, and so we greatly appreciate you taking about an hour or so of time just to speak to everybody. We're going to put this on YouTube, so be sure to check it out if you want to revisit anything, Deanna. And yeah, thank you again for participating and everything. We really appreciate it. So I hope you both have a great day, and I hope to see you both soon.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sherry.
My
Have a
pleasure.
good